The observation deck of the Galactic Council chamber floated silently in orbit above Apex Prime. Inside, representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sections, waiting. Some had scales, others had feathers, and a few existed as crystalline formations that communicated through light patterns. They had all come to witness the same thing: humanity's formal military demonstration. Ambassador Toran shifted his many legs beneath his chitinous body. He had seen hundreds of species present their military capabilities over his long career. Most were unremarkable, a few were impressive. None had ever truly surprised him. He did not expect today to be different. The humans had arrived 3 days earlier in modest ships. Their delegation was small, polite, and almost boring in their professionalism. Toran had reviewed their application to join the Galactic Defense Coalition. It contained all the standard requirements: population data, industrial capacity, military structure. Nothing stood out. Humans seemed average in nearly every category. Counselor Vesh floated in her water-filled sphere beside Toran. Her translated voice bubbled through the speaker system. "Do you think they will be worth the resources to train?" Toran clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. They requested to demonstrate 2 units: their special forces and their regular infantry. Most species only show us their best warriors. Perhaps they are proud of their military tradition, Vesh suggested. Or perhaps they do not understand what impresses us, Toran replied. The lights in the chamber dimmed. A human officer appeared on the central holographic display. His name marker translated as Lieutenant Dane. He wore a dark uniform with minimal decoration. His face was calm, almost expressionless. "Honored council members," Dane said. His voice was steady. "We thank you for this opportunity. My team will now demonstrate our capabilities in your standard combat scenarios." The holographic display shifted to show a simulation arena. It was a test that every species faced. A hostile environment with multiple enemy combatants, civilians to protect, and limited ammunition. The simulation was designed to be nearly impossible. Most species failed. The few who succeeded usually took heavy casualties. Lieutenant Dane and his 5-member team materialized in the simulation. They moved immediately, without discussion. Toran leaned forward slightly. The team's coordination was excellent. Each member seemed to know exactly where the others would be without speaking. They used hand signals that were quick and efficient. The simulated enemies appeared, aggressive insectoid warriors, twice as many as the human team. The Special Forces unit responded with precision. Their weapons fired in controlled bursts. They used cover effectively, moved in pairs, and eliminated threats with minimal wasted ammunition. When a civilian simulation appeared in the crossfire, one team member broke formation to extract the target, while the others provided cover. The entire scenario took 8 minutes, 0 casualties, perfect execution. The council chamber filled with appreciative sounds. Several species made their equivalent of applause. Toran noted the performance in his records. It was impressive. Very impressive, but he had seen similar performances from the elite units of at least a dozen other species. "Excellent work," Vesh commented. "They will make fine additions to our special operations teams." Toran agreed, but something felt incomplete. They requested to show us their regular infantry as well. "Is that necessary?" another counselor asked. "We have seen their best. Why watch their average soldiers struggle through exercises?" The human liaison officer, who had been standing quietly to the side, spoke up. "If the council permits, we would still like to complete our full demonstration." Toran made a gesture of approval. It was unusual, but not harmful. "Very well. Proceed." Lieutenant Dane and his team left the simulation. A new group of humans appeared. These soldiers looked different. Their uniforms were standard issue, showing signs of regular use. Their equipment was basic, no enhancements, no advanced technology visible. The name marker identified the team leader as Private Hyun. Private Hyun looked young. His face had not yet lost the softness of youth. He checked his rifle with practiced hands, looked at his team, and nodded once. They entered the simulation. Toran expected a competent but unexceptional performance. regular infantry from most species could handle basic scenarios, but they struggled with the complexity the council test demanded. They relied on superior officers to make tactical decisions. They followed doctrine rigidly. They needed clear orders and structure. The simulation began with the same parameters, same hostile environment, same enemies, same civilians. Private Hyun's team spread out immediately. There was a moment of communication, quick words that the translators barely caught. Then they moved. Not with the perfect precision of the Special Forces team, but with something else. Something Toran could not immediately identify. The simulated enemies attacked. The human team responded, but not with the same textbook efficiency as the Special Forces. Instead, they adapted. One soldier noticed a structural weakness in the environment and used it to create a choke point. Another repositioned without orders when he saw a better angle. A third soldier ran low on ammunition and switched to a captured enemy weapon without hesitation. When the civilian appeared, the team did not break formation cleanly. Instead, they improvised. Two soldiers created a distraction, while a third extracted the civilian through an unexpected route. It was messy, it was not perfect, but it worked. The scenario took 12 minutes. One soldier took a simulated injury but continued fighting. All objectives completed. All civilians saved. Enemy forces neutralized. The council chamber was silent. Toran felt a strange sensation in his thorax. It took him a moment to identify it. Unease. He reviewed the data again. Private Hyun's team had achieved nearly the same results as Lieutenant Dane's Special Forces. With basic equipment, with no visible enhancements, with soldiers who were classified as regular infantry. Vesh's voice bubbled with confusion. How did they? Run the analysis, Toran ordered his assistant. Compare the performance metrics. The data appeared on his personal screen. The Special Forces team had scored higher in precision, speed, and efficiency. But the regular infantry team had scored almost as high in adaptability, problem-solving, and tactical flexibility. The gap between the two teams was small, disturbingly small. Perhaps we selected an exceptional regular unit by chance? Another counselor suggested. The human liaison officer overheard. Private Hyun's squad is from the 23rd Infantry Division. They are a standard unit. We have 3,000 similar divisions. 3,000. Toran felt the unease growing. In his experience, most species had a clear division between their elite warriors and their regular soldiers. The gap was large. Elites received years of special training, genetic enhancements, or cybernetic improvements. Regular soldiers were competent at following orders but rarely capable of independent tactical thinking. These humans had regular soldiers who thought like officers, who adapted like special forces, who succeeded in scenarios designed to challenge the best warriors in the galaxy. Ambassador Toran, Vesh said quietly. What does this mean? Toran watched as Private Hyun's team exited the simulation. The young soldier was smiling, talking casually with his teammates. They looked relaxed, as if they had just completed a routine training exercise. They did not seem to understand what they had just demonstrated. It means, Toran said slowly, that we may have made an error in assessment. What error? Toran pulled up the human military structure files. He looked at the numbers with new eyes. Humans had approximately 8 million active military personnel. Of those, only about 200,000 were classified as special forces. The rest were regular infantry, support, and logistics. If their regular infantry performed at this level, if 8 million humans could fight with the adaptability and tactical thinking he had just witnessed, we asked to see their best warriors, Toran said. We were impressed by their special forces. We should have been terrified by their regular soldiers. I do not understand, Vesh said. Toran turned to face her. Most species have warriors who are exceptional and soldiers who are ordinary. The gap between the two is what defines military strength. But these humans... He paused, searching for the right words. Their ordinary is exceptional. We counted their special forces and measured our own against them. But we should have been counting everyone else. The council chamber began to fill with concerned murmurs as other representatives reached the same conclusion. The humans had not come to show off their elite warriors. They had come to demonstrate that they did not need elite warriors to accomplish elite objectives. Private Hune and his team were being congratulated by Lieutenant Dane's Special Forces Group. They were laughing together, sharing water and ration bars. There was no visible hierarchy, no separation between the special soldiers and the regular ones. They were just soldiers, all of them capable, all of them dangerous. Turan began drafting his report to the Council Military Command. He chose his words carefully, knowing they would cause alarm. But the truth had to be recorded. Humanity had not asked to join the Galactic Defense Coalition because they needed protection. They had asked because they were being polite. They could protect themselves just fine. The war room of Council High Command had never felt so crowded. Representatives from 20 species stood around the central tactical display, watching red markers spread across the map. Each marker represented a Karn Dominion fleet, and there were far too many of them. Supreme Commander Turan studied the display with growing concern. The Karn had committed nearly their entire military to this offensive. Over 2,000 capital ships, supported by countless smaller vessels and ground forces. They were advancing on 3 major fronts, overwhelming Council defenses through sheer numerical superiority. "We are losing ground on all sectors," Admiral Vesh reported. "Our forces are fighting well, but we are simply outnumbered. Current projections show complete collapse within 6 months." A heavy silence filled the room. 6 months. That was all the time they had unless something changed dramatically. The door opened. Colonel Dane entered, wearing the dark uniform of Human Military Command. He was followed by a dozen human officers, each representing different branches and units. The humans walked with quiet confidence, studying the tactical display with professional interest. "Colonel Dane," Turan said, "thank you for coming. We need to integrate human forces into our defensive strategy immediately." Dain nodded. "We have mobilized 3 full divisions for immediate deployment. Another 7 divisions will be ready within 2 weeks. We are also recalling reserve units." The numbers sounded small to some of the council representatives. 3 divisions against the Karn's hundreds, but Turan had read the reports. He understood what a human division actually represented. "Where do you recommend we deploy your forces?" Turan asked. Dane studied the tactical display for a long moment. "Everywhere, but not as concentrated units. We should integrate human squads into council forces across all fronts." "Integrate?" Vesh sounded confused. "That is unusual. Most species prefer to fight alongside their own kind." "We have reviewed your tactical doctrine," Dane explained. "Your forces are well trained and disciplined, but they wait for orders from command. Decisions flow from the top down. This creates delays in responding to changing battlefield conditions." One of the council admirals bristled. "Are you criticizing our military structure?" "No," Dane said calmly. "I am explaining the difference between our approaches. Your system works well when command and control are intact, but the Karn specialize in disrupting communications and isolating units. When your forces lose contact with command, they become defensive and wait for orders. This is when the Karn overwhelm them." Turan clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "And human forces do not have this problem?" "Our doctrine emphasizes decentralized command," Dane replied. "Every squad leader is trained to make tactical decisions. Every soldier understands the overall objective and can work toward it even without orders. We do not stop functioning when we lose communication with command. We adapt." "You are proposing that human squads will teach our forces to be more independent," Vesh said. "Not teach, demonstrate." Dane highlighted several positions on the map. "Place human squads with your units as force multipliers. Our soldiers will make tactical decisions in real time. Your forces will see how we operate and will start to adopt similar thinking. It is not about following our orders. It is about learning to trust decentralized decision-making." The council military leaders exchanged uncertain glances. It was an unconventional approach, but they were losing the war using conventional methods. "Very well," Turan decided. "We will implement your recommendation. But I want regular reports on how this integration affects unit cohesion." 3 weeks later, Sergeant Bora found herself in an uncomfortable situation. She was a regular infantry squad leader, experienced but not elite. She had expected to be deployed to frontline combat. Instead, she had been assigned to Council observation duty with a mixed unit of Vaishon and Kelthian soldiers. The mission briefing was simple: defend a supply depot from Karn raiders. The depot contained critical ammunition and medical supplies. Losing it would seriously impact defensive operations in this sector. Bora looked at the alien soldiers under her temporary command. They were professional and well-equipped, but when she asked about their tactical plan, their officer, a Veshan named Korath, simply said, "We will defend the perimeter as ordered and wait for reinforcement if we are overwhelmed." "What if reinforcements cannot reach us in time?" Bora asked. Korath seemed confused by the question. "Then we defend until we receive new orders from command." Bora felt a headache forming. These soldiers were trained to follow doctrine perfectly. But doctrine was just a framework. Real battles required adaptation. The Karn attacked at dawn. They came with twice as many soldiers as intelligence had predicted, supported by heavy armor. Bora immediately recognized the standard Karn tactic: overwhelming force, straight assault. Expect the defenders to call for help and hold out until relieved. Korath activated the communicator to request reinforcements. The signal was jammed. The Karn had cut them off from command. Korath looked uncertain, waiting for orders that would not come. "Officer Korath," Bora said, "I need you to move 3rd Squad to the eastern approach. The Karn are concentrating their forces there. If we reinforce that position now, we can create a kill zone." "But our orders are to maintain the perimeter," Korath replied. "I cannot redeploy without authorization from command." Bora forced herself to stay calm. "I understand. But communication is cut. We need to adapt to the situation. If we do not act now, they will break through and we will lose the depot." Korath hesitated. He had been trained his entire life to follow orders. Making independent tactical decisions went against everything he knew. But the human sergeant seemed so confident, and the situation was clearly deteriorating. "What do you recommend?" Korath asked. "Redeploy 3rd Squad like I suggested," Bora said. "Move the heavy weapons to high ground for better firing angles. Set charges on the western approach in case they try to flank us, and have your best shooters target their armor's weak points." She pointed to spots on her tactical display. "Here and here. Hit them there and the armor becomes useless." Korath looked at the plan. It made sense. It was aggressive but logical. He gave the orders. The battle transformed. The Karn hit the reinforced eastern position and found concentrated fire instead of a weak point. Their armor took precision hits that disabled key systems. When they tried to flank west, the charges created obstacles that funneled them into prepared kill zones. Bora moved constantly, adjusting positions, redirecting fire, exploiting opportunities as they appeared. She did not wait for permission. She saw what needed to be done and did it. The alien soldiers watched her and slowly began to understand. War was not just about following orders. It was about thinking, adapting, winning. The Karn withdrew after 2 hours of fighting. They left behind destroyed armor and many casualties. The depot was intact. Korath approached Bora as the unit secured the area. "Sergeant, I must ask, is what you did today standard for human soldiers?" "Yes," Bora said. "Why?" "Because what you did is what we expect from senior officers. You made dozens of tactical decisions without authorization. You changed the defensive plan multiple times during the battle. He paused. "You won without following doctrine." "I followed doctrine," Bora corrected. "I just adapted it to the situation. Doctrine is a guide, not a script. But how do you learn this kind of tactical thinking?" Bora shrugged. "Basic training. Every soldier learns to think tactically. It is just what we do." Korath filed a report that evening. Other council officers were filing similar reports from across the war zone. Human squads were not just fighting well. They were changing how alien forces fought. Council soldiers who served alongside humans started questioning orders, suggesting tactical improvements, taking initiative. It was spreading like a virus. A beneficial virus that made armies more effective, but challenged military traditions thousands of years old. General Toran read these reports with mixed feelings. The integration was working better than expected. Council forces with embedded human squads were performing significantly better than pure council units. But it was causing friction with traditional, military leadership who saw independent thinking as a threat to discipline. Humans are corrupting our command structure. One admiral complained during a strategy meeting, Humans are teaching our soldiers to win, Torin countered. Look at the battle reports. Units with human integration have half the casualties and twice the success rate. But at what cost to discipline? Discipline without flexibility is just obedience, Colonel Dane said. He had been listening quietly. You cannot fight every battle according to pre-written plans. The enemy adapts. The situation changes. Soldiers need to think or they become predictable, and predictable soldiers die. The Admiral wanted to argue but could not counter the results. Human methods worked. The war was beginning to turn. On the front lines, Private Hyun was experiencing war for the first time. He had joined the military 2 years ago, completed his training and been deployed to a quiet sector. Then the Karn War started and suddenly his unit was in heavy combat. His squad was attached to a Kelthian battalion defending a strategic jump point. The Karn had attacked repeatedly, trying to break through to Council supply lines. Threshold 9 was not supposed to be important. It was a small frontier world on the edge of Council space, where human colonists had settled 5 years ago. The planet had decent soil, clean water, and quiet skies. The kind of place where people went to start over, to build something simple and peaceful. Captain Mireille stood on the wall of the colony's main settlement, looking out at the farmlands beyond. She had retired from the military 3 years ago and taken a position as the colony's defense coordinator. It was supposed to be an easy job. Most days she just trained the local militia and made sure the sensor grid was working properly. Today was different. The sensor grid had picked up incoming ships an hour ago, 6 vessels moving fast, coming from the direction of Vok Empire space. Mireille had sent out distress signals immediately, but help was days away. The colony was on its own. How many people can fight? Mireille asked the mayor, an older man named Guan. Maybe 200 if we count everyone with militia training, Guan replied. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly. Another 100 if we arm the farmers who know how to shoot. 300 defenders against whatever was coming. Mireille did the math in her head and did not like the results. But she had been in worse situations during her service. Not much worse, but worse. The Vok ships landed in the open fields outside the colony. Their landing was aggressive, designed to intimidate. Dust and smoke rose into the air. Ramps dropped and warriors poured out. Mireille counted quickly, at least 800, maybe more. The Vok were reptilian, covered in thick scales that served as natural armor. They carried heavy weapons and moved with the confidence of predators who had never met real resistance. War Master Krath led them, his red scales marking him as a veteran of many conquests. Mireille activated her communicator. All units, defensive positions. Remember your training. Stay calm, watch your sectors. We hold them here. The Vok advanced in a standard formation. It was the same tactic they used on every frontier world. Overwhelming force, straight assault, break the defender's will in the first attack. Mireille had studied Vok tactics during her military service. They were effective against most species, who panicked when faced with superior numbers. Humans were different. The Vok reached the outer perimeter. The first wave hit the prepared positions. Human defenders opened fire from cover, controlled bursts aiming for the weak points between scales. The Vok had expected scattered resistance, frightened civilians shooting wildly. Instead, they found organized fire teams with interlocking fields of fire. Jun was 17 years old. He had joined the militia 6 months ago because his mother insisted everyone in the family should know how to handle a weapon. He was positioned in a small bunker on the eastern approach, next to a farmer named Yuna who was almost 60. Steady, Yuna said as the Vok warriors charged their position. Wait for them to commit. Jun's heart pounded. He had practiced this drill dozens of times, but practice was different from reality. The Vok were huge, each one twice his mass. Their weapons were designed to tear through fortifications. But Yuna's voice was calm and her calmness helped. The Vok reached the kill zone. Yuna squeezed her trigger. Jun followed a half-second later. Their shots hit a Vok warrior in the neck joint where the scales were thin. The warrior fell. The next one stepped over the body and kept coming. They don't stop, Jun said. His voice sounded thin to his own ears. Neither do we, Yuna replied. She fired again. Aim and breathe. Aim and breathe. Across the defensive line, similar scenes played out. Human defenders, most of them civilians with basic training, fought like soldiers. They did not panic. They did not break formation. When one position was threatened, nearby units shifted to provide support. When ammunition ran low, they shared supplies. When a defender was wounded, someone moved to cover their sector. War Master Krath watched from the rear of his forces. This was not going according to plan. His warriors had attacked hundreds of frontier settlements. Most surrendered within minutes. Those that fought usually collapsed after the first casualties. But these humans were different. They bled, they fell, but they did not break. Second wave, Krath ordered. Heavy weapons. Break their defensive line. The Vok brought up their heavy weapons, plasma cannons that could melt through fortified positions. The human defenses took heavy fire. Bunkers exploded. Walls crumbled. Defenders died. But the line held. Captain Mireille moved from position to position directing the defense. She saw where the Vok were concentrating their assault and shifted defenders to respond. She identified a Vok ammunition depot and ordered a small strike team to destroy it. When a section of the wall collapsed, she organized a fallback to secondary positions that had been prepared days ago. She fought like an officer, but she had only been a regular infantry captain during her service. Nothing special. Just another soldier who had done her time and retired. Yet she commanded the defense with the skill of a general, because that was what humans did. They adapted. They overcame. They refused to accept defeat as inevitable. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it finally ended, the Vok withdrew to their ships. They left behind 200 dead warriors and burning equipment. The human colony had lost 48 defenders with another 70 wounded. The farms were damaged. Buildings were destroyed. But the colony stood. War Master Krath stood in his command ship staring at the tactical display. He did not understand what had happened. His force had been superior in every way. Numbers, weapons, experience. Yet these farmer soldiers had stopped him, had hurt him, had forced him to retreat. For the first time in his long career, Krath felt something unfamiliar. Doubt. Ambassador Toran arrived at Threshold 9 2 days later. He had been traveling to another council meeting when the distress signal reached him. He had expected to find ruins and refugees. Instead, he found humans already rebuilding, treating their wounded and guarding Vok prisoners. Mireille met him at the landing pad. She looked tired, her uniform stained with dirt and dried blood. But she stood straight and offered a proper salute. "Ambassador Toran," she said, "thank you for coming." "I came as quickly as I could," Toran replied. He looked past her at the colony. "Your distress signal said you were under attack by a Vok raiding force." "We were," Mireille confirmed. "They left yesterday evening." Toran's translator took a moment to process her words. "They left? You survived?" "We defended our home," Mireille said simply. "Would you like to see the battle reports?" Toran followed her to the colony's command center. Inside, detailed tactical maps showed the battle's progression. Casualty reports listed the dead and wounded. After-action reports from squad leaders described the fighting in careful detail. Toran read through everything twice. The numbers did not make sense. 800 Vok warriors against 300 human defenders. The defenders were mostly civilians. They had basic weapons and improvised fortifications. By every military doctrine Toran knew, the colony should have fallen within an hour. "Captain Mireille," Toran said slowly, "you inflicted nearly 3-to-1 casualties against an experienced military force. Your defenders held against multiple assault waves. They conducted counterattacks. They adapted their tactics in real time." He paused. "You are listed as a retired regular infantry captain, not special forces. Not military intelligence, just infantry." "That's correct," Mireille said. "And your defenders? Their military backgrounds?" Mireille pulled up the personnel files. About 60 had military service. The rest were militia with 3 to 6 months of basic training. Farmers, teachers, engineers. Regular people, regular people. Toran had heard that phrase before, during the demonstration at the council chamber. He had not fully understood it then. He was beginning to understand it now. He walked outside and watched the humans working. June was helping repair a damaged bunker, working alongside adult colonists. Yuna was treating wounded in the medical center, her hands steady despite her age. Captain Mireille was planning defensive improvements, already preparing for the possibility of another attack. None of them seemed to think they had done anything remarkable. They had defended their homes. They had fought because fighting was necessary. They had won because losing was not acceptable. It was just what humans did. Toran requested permission to interview some of the Vok prisoners. War Master Krath agreed to speak with him, though the reptilian warrior's pride was clearly wounded. "What happened here?" Toran asked simply. Kreth's scales darkened with shame. "We attacked as we always attack. We brought overwhelming force. We expected them to break. They did not break. Why not?" "I do not know," Kreth admitted. "We killed many of them. We destroyed their fortifications. But each time we advanced, they adapted. They changed their tactics. They found our weaknesses. It was like fighting a species that had been at war for generations, but these were farmers. They should not have known how to fight like this." Toran thanked Kreth and left the detention area. He stood outside looking up at the alien sky. A report was forming in his mind, one that would disturb the Council even more than his previous assessment. Humans did not just have regular soldiers who fought like elites. They had civilians who fought like soldiers. The capacity for tactical thinking, for adaptation under pressure, for coordinated defense was not limited to their military. The final assault on Karn Prime had been planned for 3 months. It required perfect coordination between hundreds of ships and millions of soldiers from dozens of species. Supreme Commander Toran stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the fleet assemble. Human vessels moved into position alongside Council ships, a display of unity that would have been impossible a year ago. The war had turned, but it was not yet won. The Karn Dominion had retreated to their core worlds and fortified. They still had massive military strength. Breaking through their defenses would cost many lives. But it had to be done. The Karn would not negotiate. They understood only victory or defeat. "All fleets report ready," Admiral Vesh announced. Her sphere floated beside Toran's command station. "Human forces?" Toran asked. "Ready and waiting," Commander Mirai replied from her carrier group. She had been promoted from captain after her defense of Threshold 9 became famous throughout Council space. "We have reconnaissance teams prepared for insertion." Toran reviewed the assault plan one more time. It was aggressive, risky, and depended on perfect timing. A year ago, he would never have approved such a plan. But he had learned to think differently, to accept that perfect plans failed, and to prepare for adaptation instead of precision. "Begin the operation," Toran ordered. Across the fleet, thousands of soldiers prepared for battle. Among them was Private Hyun, now a decorated veteran but still serving in regular infantry. He had been offered promotion twice and declined both times. He liked being a regular soldier, liked the direct simplicity of the work. His squad was assigned to a reconnaissance mission. They needed to scout enemy defensive positions on Karn Prime before the main assault. It was dangerous work. Most Council military planning estimated 70% casualties for forward reconnaissance teams. "Squad ready?" Sergeant Bora asked. She had been promoted after her actions during the war and now led an integrated unit. 3 humans, 2 Kelthians, and 2 Vaishans. "Ready?" They responded in unison. Human and alien voices mixed, united by shared purpose. The insertion shuttle dropped them on Karn Prime under cover of darkness. The planet was heavily fortified, with defensive installations covering every major approach. The squad moved silently through hostile territory, using terrain and timing to avoid detection. Lurth, one of the Kelthian soldiers, pulsed quietly to Hyun. "By traditional assessment, this mission is suicide, yet none of you seem concerned." "It is dangerous," Hyun acknowledged. "But we have training, equipment, and each other. We will complete the mission." Such confidence. Is this human arrogance? No, it is human stubbornness. We refuse to accept failure as inevitable. They moved deeper into enemy territory. The mission required them to identify the location and strength of Karn heavy artillery positions. The data would allow the assault fleet to target key installations and create openings for ground forces. The squad found the first artillery position within 2 hours. It was massive, protected by shields and automated defenses. Hyun recorded detailed scans while Bora coordinated with the rest of the squad to ensure perimeter security. Then alarms sounded. "They had been detected. Move!" Bora ordered. The squad scattered according to pre-planned escape routes, each member knowing exactly where the others would go without needing communication. Karn soldiers poured out of nearby installations. The squad found themselves surrounded, cut off from extraction with enemy forces closing in from all directions. By any reasonable military assessment, they were finished. Bora evaluated the situation quickly. They could not fight through the Karn forces. They could not hide indefinitely. They needed a third option. Hyun, you still have those demolition charges? Yes, Sergeant. Set them on the artillery shields. If we are trapped here anyway, let us make it count. The Veshan soldiers looked shocked. That will bring every enemy soldier in the region down on us. Yes, Bora agreed. But it will also destroy their primary artillery installation. The main fleet needs these positions eliminated. If we cannot get out, we can at least complete the mission. Hyun moved without hesitation. He set charges on the shield generators while the rest of the squad provided covering fire. Karn soldiers were everywhere now, dozens of them, closing in with overwhelming force. The charges were set. Bora gave the signal. The squad took cover. The explosion was massive. It destroyed not just the shields but the entire artillery installation, creating a fireball visible from orbit. Alarm screamed across the enemy base. Karn forces temporarily fell back, confused by the destruction. In that moment of chaos, the squad ran. They used the confusion, the smoke, the darkness. They moved through enemy territory using every trick they had learned, every skill they possessed. The Karn expected them to try to escape to the extraction point. Instead, they moved deeper into the base, found a damaged section of wall, and slipped out through a gap the enemy had not thought to guard. 3 hours later, they reached the secondary extraction point. The shuttle was waiting. The entire squad made it aboard, exhausted but alive. Mission accomplished, Bora reported to command. Primary artillery installation destroyed, sending detailed scans of secondary positions now. On the flagship, Toran received the report and felt a wave of relief. The reconnaissance team had survived. More importantly, they had completed their objective and provided critical intelligence. The assault could proceed with significantly better chances of success. Human forces continue to exceed expectations, Vesh observed. I have stopped being surprised, Toran replied. This is simply what they do. The assault on Karn Prime began at dawn. The combined fleet hit the planet with overwhelming force, targeting the weaknesses identified by reconnaissance teams. Human and Council ground forces landed simultaneously, coordinating their advances with practiced efficiency. Warlord Naj, Supreme Commander of the Karn military, watched his defenses crumble from his command center. He had fought in 100 wars and never experienced anything like this. The enemy forces adapted faster than he could respond. When he reinforced one position, they attacked another. When he set ambushes, they detected and avoided them. When he tried to predict their movements, they did something unexpected. It was like fighting an opponent who could read his mind. The truth was simpler, but more disturbing. He was fighting an enemy that thought like he did, but faster and more flexibly. The Council forces had learned from their human allies. They no longer fought according to rigid doctrine. They improvised, adapted, and overcame. After 3 days of brutal fighting, Naz made a decision that no Karn warlord had made in generations. He requested negotiations. The peace talks were held on a neutral station. Councillor Vesh led the council delegation. Commander Mirai represented human forces. Warlord Naz arrived with an honor guard, his scales dulled by the shame of defeat. You have won, Naz said without preamble. State your terms. Vesh had prepared a list of reparations and territory concessions, but Mirai spoke first. We want peace, she said simply. Genuine peace, not just a pause before the next war. Naz looked at her with reptilian eyes that showed confusion. You have defeated us. You could demand our complete surrender. We could, Mirai agreed. But what would that accomplish? You would resent us, rebuild in secret and attack again when you thought you had an advantage. That is not peace. That is delayed war. What do you propose? Exchange programs, Mirai said. Send your military observers to train with our forces. Learn how we fight. Understand why we won, not so you can defeat us someday, but so you can defend yourselves from real threats. Join the council not as a conquered enemy, but as an equal partner. Naz was silent for a long moment. Why would you offer this? Because we have learned something during this war, Vesh interjected. Strong alliances are built on mutual respect and shared capability. We do not want vassals. We want partners. The treaty was signed 3 days later. It included standard peace terms, withdrawal of forces, reparations for damages, council monitoring of military development. But it also included the unprecedented provision Mirai had suggested. Karn military observers would be embedded with human and council forces for training and cultural exchange. Warlord Naz attended the signing ceremony. He approached Mirai afterward. I do not understand your species. You fight with terrifying effectiveness, but you show mercy to your enemies. We fight when necessary, Mirai replied, but we prefer peace. Fighting is just a tool for achieving it. Your Private Hyun and his squad destroyed our primary artillery installation and escaped from the center of our most secure base. By rights, they should all be dead. But they are not, Mirai said with a slight smile, because they refuse to accept that outcome. Is this refusal to accept defeat common among humans? Very common. Naj clicked his teeth, a Karn gesture of respect. We chose the wrong enemy. No, Mirai corrected. You chose the wrong approach. We could have been allies from the start. 6 months after the war ended, the formal integration of humanity into the Galactic Defense Coalition was completed. The ceremony was held in the council chamber, the same place where Lieutenant Dane had first demonstrated human military capabilities 2 years earlier. Private Hyun attended the ceremony, uncomfortable in his dress uniform. The council did not panic easily. They had existed for 3,000 years, managing conflicts and integrating new species with practiced efficiency. But Ambassador Toran's report from Threshold 9 had caused something close to panic in the military command chambers. Counselor Vesh floated in her sphere, reviewing the data for the 5th time. This cannot be typical of all humans. It must be an anomaly. General Toran, recently promoted after his reports had reached the highest levels of council leadership, shifted his weight. That is what we need to determine. I propose we deploy observation teams to multiple human installations. We need to understand if what we have witnessed is exceptional or standard. The council agreed. Within a week, carefully selected observers from various species were embedded with human military units across human space. They were told to watch, to learn, and to report honestly. The council needed to know the truth about humanity's military capabilities. Counselor Vesh led the investigation personally. She chose to observe a standard human infantry unit, conducting routine operations on a human colony world called Haven 7. The unit was unremarkable by human standards. The 157th Infantry Battalion, assigned to peacekeeping and security duties. Nothing elite, nothing special. Corporal Yuna was the medic for 2nd Squad, 4th Platoon. She had joined the military 4 years ago, completed her training and settled into the routine of a regular soldier. She was good at her job but not exceptional. Her service record showed steady performance with no particular distinctions. Vesh watched Yuna during a training exercise. The scenario involved a simulated attack on a convoy, with multiple casualties requiring immediate medical attention under fire. Vesh had observed similar training from dozens of species. Usually medics focused on following protocols, applying standard treatments in order of priority. Yuna did something different. She assessed the scene in seconds, identified which casualties needed immediate intervention and which could wait, and began treatment while coordinating with her squad for cover and evacuation. She performed a complex surgical procedure while lying flat behind minimal cover, her hands steady despite simulated enemy fire. She improvised a blood transfusion system using equipment not designed for that purpose. She kept 3 wounded soldiers alive who should have died. The scenario ended. Yuna packed her medical kit calmly, as if what she had just done was routine. The other soldiers thanked her casually and moved on to the next training exercise. Vesh approached Yuna afterward. That was remarkable medical work. Yuna looked surprised. Thank you, counselor. But it was just standard trauma response. Standard? Vesh's translator struggled with her disbelief. You performed surgical procedures that would require a specialized medical team in most militaries. All our combat medics learn advanced trauma surgery, Yuna explained. We have to. Battles are chaotic. You cannot wait for specialists. You learn to handle everything yourself or people die. Vesh filed this observation in her growing report. Human medics operated at the level of specialized surgeons. They expected every soldier to have advanced medical knowledge because expecting anything less meant accepting unnecessary deaths. The bar for standard was extraordinarily high. On another world, Observer Kelth, a crystalline being who communicated through light pulses, was embedded with a human unit conducting patrol operations. Among the soldiers was Private Kwan, whose service record contained an interesting note. He had attempted Special Forces selection and failed. Kelth decided to focus on Kwan. If a soldier who failed Special Forces selection was still serving in regular infantry, It would provide useful data about the gap between human elite and regular troops. The patrol encountered an unexpected situation. A bridge had collapsed on their route, forcing them to find an alternative path through difficult terrain. The squad leader called for suggestions. Private Quan studied the terrain, pulled up topographical data on his datapad, and proposed a route that would take 3 hours longer, but avoided several potential ambush points. He explained his reasoning clearly, pointing out sightlines, defensible positions, and water sources along the way. The squad leader considered the proposal and agreed. Good thinking, Quan. You take point. Kelth watched this interaction with growing confusion. Private Quan had just demonstrated tactical analysis that most species reserved for officers. He had presented his assessment confidently to his superior, who had not been offended by a subordinate's suggestion, but had actually accepted it. Later, Kelth accessed Quan's Special Forces evaluation. The failure notes cited insufficient scores in advanced technical skills and personality better suited to team operations than independent missions. Kelth reviewed the actual test scores and experienced something close to shock. Quan's scores would have qualified him for elite units in almost any other military. He had failed human Special Forces selection not because he was inadequate, but because he was not extraordinary enough. The standards were so high that extremely capable soldiers were rejected, and those rejected soldiers returned to regular infantry, where they continued to perform at levels that would make them elite warriors in other species' militaries. Vesh compiled reports from all the observers. The data was consistent across every unit, every location, every type of operation. Human soldiers, regardless of rank or specialization, demonstrated several universal capabilities. They questioned orders when those orders did not make sense, but they followed orders they understood without hesitation. They adapted to changing situations without waiting for new instructions. They took initiative when opportunities appeared. They cooperated seamlessly with their teammates, often without verbal communication. They thought tactically, always aware of their position, their resources, and their objectives. Most disturbing of all, they expected these capabilities from each other. It was not exceptional behavior. It was baseline competence. Vesh decided she needed to understand why. She requested access to human military training facilities and historical databases. The humans agreed without hesitation, apparently seeing no reason to hide their methods. She studied human evolution first. Humans were pursuit predators, a rare evolutionary path. They had succeeded not through strength or speed, but through persistence and intelligence. They tracked prey for days, working in coordinated groups, adapting their tactics to each situation. They learned to recognize patterns, to think ahead, to cooperate across complex social structures. Then she studied human history. War was woven through every century of human civilization, not constant war, but frequent enough that military thinking had become embedded in their culture. They told stories about soldiers, wrote books about tactics, played games that simulated combat. Children grew up learning strategic thinking through play. The human military training system built on these foundations. Basic training took civilians and taught them not just to follow orders, but to understand the purpose behind orders. It emphasized decision-making under pressure, adaptability, and independent thinking. Soldiers were expected to function even when cut off from command, even when plans collapsed, even when everything went wrong. Because for humans, that was when wars were actually won. Not in the perfect execution of perfect plans, but in the chaotic moments when everything failed, and individual soldiers had to figure out what to do next. Vesh met with General Toran to discuss her findings. They sat in a secure chamber reviewing months of observation data. They are all like this, Vesh said. Every soldier we observed. Every unit. It is not training. It is not technology. It is them. This is what humans are. Toran clicked his mandibles slowly. I have reached the same conclusion. But what does it mean for the Council? It means our entire understanding of military organization is insufficient, Vesh replied. We classify military forces by their elite units. We measure strength by comparing the best warriors. But humanity does not fit this model. Their strength is not concentrated at the top. It is distributed throughout. Like a weapon that is sharp along its entire length, Toran suggested. Exactly. And I have realized something else. Vesh pulled up comparative data. Look at the ratio between support personnel and combat troops across different species. Torin examined the data. Most species had 3 or 4 support personnel for every combat soldier. Logistics, intelligence, command structure all required specialists who could not fight effectively. Now look at humans. The human ratio was almost 1-to-1. Their support personnel were soldiers who happened to be performing support duties. A human logistics specialist could fight if needed. A human intelligence analyst could lead troops in an emergency. A human cook had basic combat training. They do not have soldiers and non-soldiers, Vesh said. They have soldiers and soldiers who are currently doing something else. The entire military is a combat force. Turan felt the weight of this realization. How many humans are in their military? 8 million active personnel. Another 20 million in reserves who can be recalled within weeks. And all of them are combat capable? All of them. The silence stretched. Finally, Torin spoke. The Council needs to update its threat assessment protocols. Humanity is not just another military power. They are a military species. Should we fear them? Vesh asked.